Hey,
We're
everybody.
finally on.
We tried.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Clay Moffat. I feel like I need to introduce myself again. We were sitting here just talking with each other because StreamYard kept giving us error messages that it couldn't connect. It needed more resources. So finally got their side worked out. We were just wasn't expecting it to pop up. But good seeing you.
Oh.
Hello, Melissa. How are you doing, girl? Hope
Hey,
everything is
Melissa.
going well with you and
And
yours.
it's still not up on X
Anything
or
I need to
Rumble.
do? It shows
Okay, now we're up
that
on
we're
Rumble, but
live.
not X.
Huh.
This
StreamYard
broadcast
is
is not
showing that
available
it's
on
live
X.
on my feed.
I'm sure it is. I'm just saying it's not on. This broadcast is not available.
Try refreshing your screen.
I have.
Huh.
Still not.
Well, that's interesting. I've got all three
If you are
channels.
there if you're on X and you are seeing this, please let us know. Because I am not getting squat.
Let me see here.
And
I'm going to try calling it up real quick, see what I can get.
okay.
So y'all forgive the delay while we're sitting here piddly dicking around. We will get to the show sometime. Let's face it, it's been a week or two. We're just a little rusty.
Okay, you're seeing that too. That's so weird.
Where does it
And
show
my
up?
connection's unstable. On your channel?
I'm looking. I don't see a channel in the menu.
If you go to @Moffat on Money
Yep.
on X.
Yep. I'm there. Home,
It should be the
profile.
first thing.
Okay,
Just
there
go
it
to
is. And it's spinning. It's like it's trying to get started.
Yeah.
Not there yet. Interesting.
Hang on. I've heard there's been a lot of issues with the Twitters this week. Yeah, they've been lots of attacks, apparently. Lots of cyber attacks. The latest one today was apparently pretty intense.
Yeah. I haven't had much trouble with X today like I did yesterday. I had a lot of problems with it yesterday. But I just checked the channel and the video is not streaming. It shows okay from StreamYard's end, so apparently there's some issue with X. But
Yeah.
On Rumble, on YouTube, I think we're okay. Okay, and it is
Rumble's
good to be with you. It's been a little while.
It has. We had lots of traveling and stuff going on, and it's good to be back with you, Clay. Hadn't seen you in a while.
It has been a while. Ellen has been
Mhm.
busy. She's been rebuilding a gazebo that got blown up in the wind. She's showed pictures
And
of
just
it.
wind, like, huh?
I was thinking you showed pictures of it last Tuesday.
Did I?
Did you put it up on the show?
I know I sent them to you. I don't think so.
Yeah. I didn't know if you'd put them up on the show when I was gone or not, but
No.
it looked like a little
Nope.
mini hurricane. So they ordered a replacement, and that's what E-Train was doing today, was putting up the gazebo. So kind of a productive day for the girl.
Yes, I did.
Give her a cheer. She
I was
likes
busy
she likes
putting shit
building and
together.
making things. She does.
Mhm.
She's good at it.
Thank you.
Just the simple truth. Well, I obviously you've been a little busy with work.
Yeah, how's Prague?
Prague was
Mm.
kind of busy, kind of beautiful, kind of both. It was pretty much nonstop. When I travel, I normally don't spend a whole lot of time in the room anyway, but this was a little bit more
Oh, oh no.
draining. What?
Twitter has broadcast has ended.
Huh. Still shows okay on
Interesting.
mine.
Hmm.
Still shows
I'm
we're live
sorry if y'all
on
are,
StreamYard.
well, on StreamYard, that doesn't mean anything.
No.
I think they just shut it down. Yep. Well, if you tried to watch on X, I do apologize. If you are on Rumble, please don't be afraid to chat, ask questions. That's what we're here for tonight. I am watching the stream on Rumble as well. And of course, YouTube. Ask questions, do your thing.
Yeah. And you know, about Prague, it was busy, it was hectic, it was tiring. The plane ride and the airport is probably about 24, 25 hours, 23 to 25 hours. And so it makes for a long
Mhm.
day. I don't sleep on planes, trains, cars, whatever. So that's a little bit
Beds,
of a
anything.
yeah, that's a little bit of an issue, but Prague is a beautiful city, incredibly beautiful city. I've got some more pictures to put up and show that I haven't put up yet. So probably won't do it tonight, may do it Saturday. But like there was one place I went, it was a museum of alchemy, um, which
Alchemy.
the house was one of the oldest in Prague and it dates back to like 1400. And it's in the old town in the Jewish section.
Hmm.
But you go into one of the back rooms and there's this beautiful bookcase filled with some of the old vials. It's got one old bottle they found that dates back to roughly 1600. They can't date it exactly,
Wow.
of the magic potions and stuff that they would make. And
Hmm.
the carving, the intricacy of this bookcase is just incredible. And so the guide sitting there talking turns around and takes basically a statue and turns it. And one of the sections of the bookcase slides back and over and reveals a tunnel,
How awesome is that?
stairway. It was pretty cool. It was pretty awesome. So we went down it's a narrow stairway, obviously 400 or 500 years old, and there are all sorts of
Magic.
rooms along this tunnel and paths. They had a
That's so
little
cool.
glass. Yeah, they had a little glass blowing factory down there because obviously, if they were going out buying a lot of glass and vials and the flask that you use to distill
Hmm.
liquids, that would be a little suspicious because this
Yeah.
practice was not legal.
No.
And apparently, one of the tunnels was accessed by the king, who said the stuff was illegal, but yet wanted to use it. They had an elixir of life, for example. And
Have you read The Alchemist?
no, not specifically. I've read
Great,
books on it.
great book. It's called The Alchemist.
Who wrote
It's
it?
by
Do you know? Do
Paulo
you remember?
Paulo Coelho.
The name sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah. He's written, but that was a great, yeah. Melissa's read it. Good book. She says, magic. I need that. The hidden staircases and rooms. Yeah, it's a very good
I,
book.
yeah, I thought that was cool as hell. And they had a lot of the little rooms and labs, and it was small, it was cramped, it was dark, but it was cool. Very cool.
I bet.
So that was, and then, I went into some of the churches. Prague has an absolutely incredible cathedral. Now, I love
Mhm.
church architecture, particularly Gothic architecture. And, these buildings took 600 years to build. Whole communities dedicated their lives to it. Some people, that's the only job they ever had,
Right.
for a lot of them. And the vast majority never got to see the fruits of their labors. But I've got some pictures and I'll post them, but just the detail, the height, the buttresses, the flying arches, it's just incredible. I've talked about Frank Lloyd Wright, how he believed that space determines attitude. And it's
It does.
amazing. Anybody that goes in these cathedrals or church, their whole countenance, manner, their voice, everything changes. And outside the church, they're smiling, laughing, cutting up, doing a little shouting, trying to keep the kids in order, whatever. Inside the cathedral, boom, very, very quiet, very, very slow moving. Everything
Would you call that
becomes
more at peace?
peace, a reverence, and awe, a stillness,
Hmm.
just consumed by the grandeur of the structure and the ornateness. Um, I just it's something you have to see to really know. I can't
Hmm.
the words fail me, but it is when you think of people that dedicated their whole lives to building such, it just becomes a living story set in stone to me. And I love architecture, and Prague is full of architecture and interesting
Yeah.
buildings and history. I love history and architecture. Walking the St. Charles Bridge, um,
Yes.
it has very detailed sculptures all up and down it.
Hmm.
Uh, all sorts of stories, which I will not
Yep.
try to replicate, but you're just constantly surrounded by pretty, and I like that.
Yeah. Prague is gorgeous, and last time I was there, it was very clean. It's just
Yes.
very pristine. It's weird to it's like this is a city, like a major city, because it's like the streets perfectly clean. There's a lot of, in my opinion, it's almost like a white clean. Like it's just
Yeah. Now, in
absolutely gorgeous.
in some areas, I did notice a little graffiti, but you
Hmm.
saw really no trash. You didn't
Hmm.
see any vandalism. Very few
Right.
police. The first thing I noticed the night I was there, the first night I was there, I didn't hear
Mhm.
sirens. You go to any major
Which,
city,
yeah,
yeah, in the world, and you hear sirens. I didn't hear sirens. I saw maybe 2 or 3 sirens while I was there, and all 3 of them were ambulances. One of them was a police. That was it. Um, so a remarkable city. Love the city. It's a different place. So I recommend it highly if you ever get
it
a
is.
chance to go. All right. Well, let's get into some of the questions, issues of the past week or two. I wish there was something interesting going on that I could talk about. So I've kind of
Oh,
struggled with the
really?
topic, but
The
we'll
Dow
figure
is
out something.
down and VIX is way up, like doubled. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Really?
Yeah,
Sorry.
it was a hell of a week to take off.
Mhm.
And we'll start with this little graph showing the markets going boom or going bust, however you want to word it. It's a little bit of a messy chart, but you can see I've got the NASDAQ 100, S&P 500's in the blue, Dow Jones is in the orange, and Bitcoin is the purple.
Basically, everything's going to shit.
Yeah.
Except VIX.
Well, when this goes down, VIX goes up. So VIX is doing really well.
Yes.
It's been a hell of a week or two. It actually, started at the end of February, but people didn't notice it, think too much about it. But as it's continued, lot more focus has been thrown upon it. We'll talk about that some tonight. If we look at the end of, whoops, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I have so many questions about all this. It's just like, sorry.
Well, that's all right.
I'm kind of ahead of myself at this point.
Nah.
Who, me?
If people are talking about, for example, the Dow has taken it on the chin, probably more so than the others. But if you look at the graph in the middle of January, the Dow was just about as low as it is now. Now, the S&P 500, Bitcoin, NASDAQ didn't drop as much. But out of all the indices, well, Bitcoin's down about 22%.
I noticed.
The Dow, the Dow is down about 11 or 12%. NASDAQ down about 8. S&P's down about 8, 7 or 8. 10%, down 10% is considered a correction. And corrections happen usually once a year, once every 2 years. We have gone an extremely long time, a number of years, without a 10% correction.
We need a lot of correction on the market.
Yeah, and 20 or 30% drop happens every 5 or 6 years. And we are, a number of years away from that. So in one sense, we're due. And if you've been listening to this channel for a while, I've talked about repeatedly, E-Train and I have talked about repeatedly about how the market is overvalued and the economy is struggling. There's some major issues and concerns in the economy. We'll talk about some of those tonight again as we go through. But this is not,
and if
you've been listening to the channel, this is not a surprise.
Hang on. And if you haven't been listening and you're shocked, maybe you should tune in a little more often.
Yeah. I've been talking and advising. I don't give investment advice. I just talk about what I do and how I, view the market, manage my funds, etc. And I've been in cash for months. Probably went a little too early, but there is no way to time it perfectly. But there are times when, if you're looking at the market, historically, when you can tell that it's a time to start de-risking, risk off, reduce your risk. Buffett started going to cash, 9 months ago? Druckenmiller started 6, 7 months ago. Two of the best investors in modern history. Nobody times it perfectly. Yeah, nobody times it perfectly. But, if it's a 10% correction, I'm probably at break even. If it's 20%, 30%, head of the game significantly. So if you've been watching the channel, again, I believe for the most part, you have a far better understanding of what's going on in the markets and why, and are not necessarily shocked or surprised by what's going on. I hope you're not. Now, in terms of causes, what's going on? What's generating this drop? A lot of the media is focused on the tariffs. And, I got to admit, I don't really think it's the tariffs. And the reason
Nope.
is if I look at the market since here's October 31, a few days later, November the 4th, Trump wins election. Now, Trump had been talking about tariffs for a year, stated repeatedly what he was going to do, how he was going to do it. And he's doing it. But look what happened to the market when he got elected. The market took off. Here in the early December, 1st of December, Trump started talking about the tariffs in detail, exactly what he was going to do. So the market held up through the middle of December, dropped a little bit, popped back up. Okay, it's got some choppiness to it. But look here, near the 1st of February, the trade war began. China, Canada, Mexico announced retaliatory tariffs. Trade war begins. Its own, like Donkey Kong. What'd the market do? It went up. It peaked 2 weeks later, months after the tariff talk started, after it got real, after the, proverbial shit hit the fan. So I don't really think the market's terribly worried about the tariffs. We went through tariffs under Trump 1. And most people know they're a negotiating tactic to try to reduce tariffs on American products. How's this going to work out in the economy? Well, Canada's exports to the U.S. are about 70% of its exports. U.S. exports to Canada are about, 5, 6, 7%. So
How does that make sense?
Canadian tariffs really aren't going to affect us.
Do you know what
Tariffs
one of
on
our
Canada's
biggest exports to Canada is?
oil.
Toilet paper.
Oh, toilet paper. Well, it's not in dollars, but 90% of Canada's toilet paper comes from the U.S.
So wouldn't that be fun if we just stopped sending them toilet paper?
Yeah. Yeah, if they get too ugly or rude,
Mm-hmm.
we can educate them quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a cute little joke. For those, we have some very dear friends in Canada. And I'll be honest, I'm very sorry to see this increasing hostility, booing each other's national anthem, that kind of stuff going on.
That was awful.
Canadians historically have been very good friends. The U.S., very good friends to Canada. We've had open borders. But I don't think our position is wholly unreasonable.
So what
We
about
want zero
Canada?
tariffs both ways.
What about Canada threatening to cut off power to the U.S.?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, they supply excess power to 3 states, New York, Michigan, Minnesota. And, over the past 10, 20 years, even with the infrastructure bill, not a dime has gone to improving the electrical grid.
Right.
So I'm not sure if they cut it off, exactly what the consequences will be
Mm-hmm.
for those states. The good thing is we're coming out of winter, so they'll be having some not as cold months. They'll still be a little colder than we are, but their energy demand should drop some. So I'm not sure what net effect that will have. Trump, as that was announced that he's hiking tariffs on Canadian products even further. So
Well,
literally, if he keeps hiking them, he'll shut off trade with Canada, and that will absolutely crush the Canadian economy.
and we won't send them toilet paper if they shut off our power.
Yeah. I mean, this is just not a battle that should be fought.
It's a stupid battle.
It is, and I hate seeing it. I would much prefer that we have free trade between the two countries. I think ultimately we both would be far better off. Canada, has a lot of problems with its, current healthcare system and government. There's been a lot of turmoil with government. We obviously have trouble with our government spending, a lot of the social programs. A ton of waste and fraud is being uncovered. So we both have serious problems inside our own borders that we need to be addressing and quit pissing on each other. My opinion.
I agree.
And I hope for both countries' sake that this comes to an end quickly. I agree, Melissa. It is all absurd. But
And real quick, Moffat, what do you think about this budget that they have apparently has passed through Congress that I know Thomas Massey did not agree with and voted against?
The continuing resolution.
Yeah, the CR.
Yeah, I think Massey's wrong.
Do you?
Yeah. Massey, when I was in surgery, when I worked in surgery, there was a saying that surgeons repeated often. Perfect is the enemy of good. So when you're repairing a major artery and you're sewing it up, if you try to get it exactly perfect and you keep nitpicking at it, there's a good chance you'll rip it and really blow it up. If you get it closed good is great. And, Massey wants everything all at once.
He's an engineer. I get it.
And Trump he's butting heads with the courts. He's butting heads with the Democrats. He's got a 2-vote margin in the Senate, a 4-vote margin in the House. He can't afford to lose votes and get anything done. The Democrats want government shut down because that stops DOGE from continuing to, investigate, find fraud, do things. It gives them more time to do whatever they want to do. So Massey is agreeing with the opposition party. He may have different reasons, but, I think if you support Trump's overall agenda, and I know many of our viewers don't, I'm not arguing it's all correct or whatever. We all have our views on that. But if you support Trump's general views, Ellen,
I haven't eaten all day today. I'm sorry.
Well, knock out some of that pizza.
I had my mic off.
Huh?
I had my mic off.
Girl is attacking some pizza.
I'm sorry. I'm so hungry.
No, it's good to see you eat. Guys, we actually kind of like seeing girls eat. It's either funny or terribly attractive or cute or whatever, adjective you want to use. It's good seeing you eat. Anyway,
I'm just hungry.
I think Massey wants perfection immediately. And Trump is basically waging a war against government that's been in place for 40 years. He's not going to be able to do everything overnight. And I think it's important that DOGE keeps running. Melissa, Runkle eats on stream all the time. Does he sit there and absolutely devour a pizza? Like a starving puppy. I can't imagine watching Runkle eat being cute. It's just not on my list of the top 10 things I want to do. But that's funny. And for those of you that
Oh,
don't
you
know,
think I'm cute?
as you stuff your face, yeah.
Hmm.
He orders food while on stream, then eats it. That's funny. Does he order it like from DoorDash or something? Or does
I think so.
maybe his wife fixes it and brings it to him? I don't know.
Mm-mm. He actually orders out.
Oh, that's funny. I can't imagine. Y'all, excuse me. I've got to go to the door and get my burger.
No, they beg it. They're like, please go get your food. It's great.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Things I have never experienced in my life. People begging me to go eat. But for those of you who don't know, Runkle is a popular LawTube channel. We even had him on the show once. Good guy, a Canadian lawyer who talks I don't know if I can say mostly, but who's very active on gun law. But a good guy. He and Rob, Law and Lumber, have a Friday night show. So, in fact, that's one reason why we do Saturday nights. We didn't want to directly go head to head with them. But Rob even gave us a big shout out one night. And that's where a lot of you, a lot of our subscribers came from initially. Gave us a big bump there. And we are always grateful. So, tariffs. I don't think tariffs is really the central problem of the market drop. If you listen to something besides the media, also want to throw out a little reminder here, if you will, hit the like button for us, hit the subscribe button, ring the hell out of that bell. Do us the little favors. We do appreciate you watching, but if you would help us out a little bit by doing that, we would be most grateful. So I think probably a greater issue among most investors concerned about increasing risk, talking about increasing chances for recession. And it's obvious the mood in the market has changed. A lot of the networks are just talking about tariff fears. But for the reason I just demonstrated, I don't think tariffs is a big issue. I mean, the market reached a high when the tariff wars started. That's, experienced people in the market, they know the outcome. The timing may be a little uncertain, but we all know the outcome. But what has really increased in focus, for example, the number one topic in the news is what today? That would largely be DOGE. So, it kind of made me think, is the market growing increasingly concerned about cuts in government spending? And I've railed about this for a year or two. But if the market is becoming concerned about the cuts in government spending, then that is an admission or a realization that the GDP numbers we have seen over the past couple of years were trash, complete and utter trash. And the markets were sold a pile of steaming shit. We have a $2 or possibly $3 trillion deficit this year alone. So I wonder if the market isn't concerned about removing $2 trillion from GDP, if that's the real story. The practical reality is that government has grown to where it's 30% of GDP. 30% of GDP goes through Washington, D.C. I've talked about for a year or two how the private sector has really taken it on the chin. We've talked extensively about some of the pain that the private sector has gone through. Commercial real estate has been hammered. We're seeing residential real estate now start to drop. We've talked about how over 2 million full-time jobs have been lost over the past year and a half, 2 years. How manufacturing has been in contraction for 24 out of 25 months. How the total jobs number created, every month the Biden administration would celebrate the jobs number, the number of jobs created. Well, at the end of the fiscal year, there was a rebalancing, and the BLS cut 820,000 jobs from the number that had been released. Said, it was a little bit of an overcount. Half the jobs that they claimed they had were mythical. Out of the jobs that were created, the vast majority of those were part-time. The number of people holding 2 or more jobs reached an all-time high. Now, E-Train and I have been warning people, about this over the past year. None of that should be new to you. But the practical reality is it's news to the market in general, who I think is just starting to figure some of this out. Secondly, the issue that I call the Yellen duration disaster. And it's a huge problem. Duration is a word in the bond industry that's kind of code for bond maturity. It's actually a weighted average of the cash flows. So it's a way to answer the question, how long does it take you to get your initial investment back? So if you buy a $1,000 bond, it pays 10% per year, and in 10 years it matures and gives you your $1,000 back. Well, you're getting $100 in interest every year. So if you weigh that interest payment by time, then you actually end up getting your money back in 9 years, 8.5 years. So the duration's 8.5 years. And that's how bonds trade. Well, Yellen went short on everything her last 4 years, rather than spread the maturity, the duration out. The net result is, out of $36 trillion in total debt accumulated over 150 years, 10 trillion of it, or 1/3 of it, is coming due and will have to be refinanced this year. 1/3 of it. But wait, that's not all. In addition, the government will have to borrow another $2 or $3 trillion to cover this year's deficit. But wait, that's not all. Yellen, her last year, instead of borrowing an additional $1 trillion, she spent $1 trillion of cash reserves that were saved up for a rainy day fund. Like when the government shuts down, it hopes to be able to continue to operate and pay its bills until Congress can get its act together and agree on a budget. Well, that $1.6 trillion reserve fund is now down to about $500 billion. So does that need replacing? Most likely. Net, bottom line, the government will have to fund or refund about $14 to $15 trillion in debt this year. That's nearly 40% of our total outstanding debt now. The normal issuance is about $3 trillion a year. So this year we're looking at a 4 or 5 times normal supply. You know, I wish that was the end of the story, but it's not. The 3 biggest foreign investors buying U.S. Treasuries are China, Japan, and Saudi Arabia. Each one of those countries is not only not buying Treasuries, they're dumping the Treasuries they have, been selling them off the past year or two, which adds to the supply of Treasuries. So you've got
Moffat,
5 times, ma'am.
this is depressing.
Oh, I'm not done yet.
I know. I'm just saying.
You want to know why the market's dropping? Because it's getting bitch slapped with reality.
There you go.
You know, so we're going to have 5 times the supply of normal years and reduced demand. Big buyers are out of the market. So being an economist, it's a function of supply and demand. When you have an increase in supply, a great increase in supply, when you have a reduction in demand, what happens to price? Well, increase in supply, reduction in demand, price drops.
Mm-hmm.
Now remember the teeter-totter on the bond. When price drops, interest rates rise. So with this
Here's
kind
some
of
kitty cat
supply,
purring
I know it's cute.
for those of you who are shocked and need some love.
Yeah, we are a very pet-friendly channel. So interest rates are going to rise. Some people are arguing that's why Trump is trying to crash the markets to get interest rates down so they don't rise as much as they handle this issuance of Treasury debt.
Is he trying to
Now,
crash it?
well, that's what they're arguing. I don't think he's trying to crash it. I just think he realizes it's a practical reality of all the sins that have been accruing over the past several years. It's going to happen. I've been saying it's going to happen for 6 months. And we'll look at some other reasons why as we go through. I've already talked about some. The cuts in government spending will reduce GDP. The fake economic numbers that have been produced to try to boost the market up. Well, the market now realizes that's, a lot of that was just lies. You've got Yellen's duration disaster. And then you've got the annual interest expense. Right now, we're spending $1.5 trillion a year on interest and interest alone on the national debt. That's out of a $6 trillion budget. Keep in mind, income tax revenues are $2.2 trillion. So $1.5 trillion currently. As we refinance half of the national debt, it's going to be at a much higher rate. So that interest rate is going to increase 50, 60, 70, 100% in some cases. So by the end of this year, our interest payments on the national debt could go from 1.5 trillion to 2.25, 2.5 trillion. So we would be spending more on interest expense than we'll be collecting in income taxes. That's almost third world nation stuff.
Which is why DOGE is so important.
That's why DOGE is critical. If we don't get this under control, we will enter a cycle of having to print money that makes Argentina and Zimbabwe look like rookies. Looks like rank amateurs. I mean, maybe inflation wouldn't go to 1,000%, so I shouldn't say that, but it'll be much higher than what you want. Whatever you want, it'll be much higher. So those are big problems. And I think more and more investors and money managers, et cetera, are focusing on on those issues that are deeply, deeply systemic and not tariffs, which are transitory, temporary. Now, once Trump gets to permanent tariffs and replacing the income tax, that'll be a different story. We can kind of talk about that at the time. But in a nutshell, my thoughts on that is that the permanent tariffs will increase the cost of some of the foreign goods you buy. However, if your income taxes are cut, net, the average low income, medium income family is going to be far better off in terms of disposable income. So, yeah, I'd be willing to pay 5% more for goods each month if I save 15 or 20% in income tax. That would kind of be the
Now
trade-off
this,
around those numbers.
yeah. Now this Social Security, was it 750 million or 7.5 billion something that they're going to give back to people? Have you
Yeah,
heard about that?
I haven't looked into that a whole lot. Um,
Apparently, if you're a federal worker or you have a pension, because there was
yes.
some kind of windfall exemption or whatever. Because I'm curious if my grandfather is going to get anything back because he has a pension.
I'll have to look at the
Um,
details more. I haven't really spent a whole lot of time on it. I think
okay.
the general idea is that a lot of federal retirees didn't get Social Security even though they paid into it. And the
Mhm.
administration changed the position and said, they paid into it, they ought to be paid. So they'll be able to start collecting Social Security in addition to their federal pensions. I don't think it'll
Okay.
affect private pensions or private sector retirees, but I'll
Okay.
look into it a little bit more, try to get better details.
You let me know because I
So,
can't make heads or tails of it.
yeah, and one thing that the administration is also trying to do is to weed out um, some of the possibly fraudulent accounts that are receiving Social Security,
Mhm.
and or we've talked about how uh, illegal immigrants, if they're granted asylum, are immediately eligible for full Social Security benefits. So they're trying to get that stopped as well. Don't
Well,
know
good.
how much in terms of savings that would generate, but it can't hurt if you're concerned about the solvency of the Social Security Trust Fund, which is a big issue. It hadn't gotten a lot of
Yeah, it is.
attention, but it's a big issue, even if people aren't paying
Well, what
attention to
do
it.
I know I asked you this earlier today, just as something to kind of opine on. But if you're, let's say you're thinking about retiring, and you look at your retirement account now and thinking, oh my God, can I even do it? Because the accounts
Well,
are obviously with the stock market going to shit.
there's two ways to answer that. One, I'm hopeful that most of the people listening to the show were more in cash, moved their money out of equities and into cash over the past 6 months. For those who didn't, um, there's going to be some pain, and we're probably not done yet. The flip side is how quickly can the market recover? I saw where Vanguard the other day or last week estimated that the return in the stock market would be 3% a year for the next decade, which literally made me laugh. These guys can't tell you what the market is going to do tomorrow, much less what the hell it's going to do over the next 10 years. I won't even
Isn't
try.
Vanguard owned by BlackRock?
No, they're investment companies.
Okay, I thought BlackRock owned most of all those.
No, a lot of people are confused about investment advisors. If I run, when I ran a portfolio, I would buy assets. Might be real estate, might be agricultural land, might be, stocks, whatever. I don't own that. I purchase it on behalf of my investors. They are the owners. I select the investment. I buy it on their behalf. I sell it on their behalf. But I never own it. Now, I think the problem you were kind of alluding to was, for years, BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, Fidelity to an extent, when the companies would have a shareholder meeting, they send out proxy statements to the institution, the mutual fund, the pension fund, the investment fund, whatever, because they don't know who the individuals are investing in that fund. And then it becomes BlackRock's duty to take that shareholder meeting notice, the proxy statement, replicate it, and send it out to the investors. Well, for years, they weren't really doing that. What they were doing is just voting those shares on behalf of the investors. And so that gave Larry Fink, for example, the CEO of BlackRock, a lot of power to influence companies. And BlackRock took a big hit for that. They lost trillions of dollars in money managed. A lot of states, for example, took their money out of BlackRock. Well, BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, they've all changed. They are now saying, hey, we're getting out of the corporate management business, and we will pass the proxy votes on to the shareholders and let them vote however they wish. We are not going to push
When did that
a
start?
particular ideology. Do what?
When did that start?
Oh, I don't know. This a year ago.
Okay, good.
So BlackRock has never owned these companies. They in their funds, their investors own a big chunk of various companies. But BlackRock,
they were voting for their
actually,
investors.
yes. BlackRock has never owned them and doesn't own
How is
them.
that legal?
It really kind of isn't, but it was just nobody paid attention to it.
Okay.
That I have been a modestly big critic of the SEC. They generally have sucked in terms of their regulatory execution and fulfillment of their duties. I think a lot of the computer trading is illegal. It trades on foreknowledge, which is blatantly illegal. Foreknowledge. If I'm a broker and you're my client and you come in and you want to buy $5 million of Apple, $10 million, $20 million of Apple. Well, I know when I place that order that it's going to cause the price of Apple to go up. I can see all the price listings of different people trying to sell it at different prices and the number of shares available. And I can see it's going to drive the price up a nickel, 50 cents, whatever.
Pause.
So what I do is...
Pause.
Yeah.
Is that the same as insider information?
It is a type of it.
Okay.
But there's a specific provision for this. So if I know you're going to buy a big slug of Apple and move the price, or sell a big slug of Apple and move the price, I take my order, and put it in before yours. Then I put your order in. The price moves, I sell mine. So I make, if I do 100,000 shares, I make 50 cents a share. So I make 50 grand on the deal. Takes me 2 minutes. You do that repeatedly, you're talking about some real money. That's foreknowledge. Well, that's highly illegal. But algorithmic trading, computer trading, computers do it all the time. when you as an individual or institutional investor place a big order, it's routed through to a computer and executed. But the devil's always in the details. That routing process goes through several switches that slows it down. And other computers can see that order being processed and routed. And they can insert their order before that one, before yours.
What?
And so electronically, computers are for trading. And the SEC allows that.
Is that like an AI thing, or is that
SEC.
no? But
And it's just
AI
standard
what
practice
allows
now.
it to do that.
No, computers have been able to do that for decades. Ever since they went to electronic trading. And that's one reason why I'm against algorithmic trading. I think it's grossly unfair to individual investors. The whole idea of trading stocks is everybody should have the same opportunity. Admittedly, some people are better than others. Some people have better information. Some people do more work, whatever. But the idea is that they ought to have the same opportunity.
So is that the same as black box trading?
Yeah. Computers rob you, make it impossible for you to have the same opportunity. There was a programmer for Goldman Sachs who wrote one of these algorithmic trading programs. He was a Hungarian, Polish, or Czech, I forget, one of the Eastern European nationalities. And so he wrote Goldman's program. Well, he kept a copy and was boarding a plane to go back home to Czechoslovakia or wherever. The FBI arrested him and charged him with possession of a program that was able to manipulate stock prices. They never charged Goldman. Just him. Same program. Goldman uses it every day. Makes no sense. Makes absolutely zero sense. So there's I'm never a fan of regulation, but one big reason is because it's usually highly selective. And it normally works against the little guy time and time and time again. So, all the regulations, changes, and laws are always proposed and put in place to help, you, the little guy, the average citizen, the average Joe, the average Jane. Practical reality is the rich profit. It rigs the system to lessen competition, to decrease information, transparency, whatever, any series of those. So that's just a nice little aside now that we're on happy news.
Sorry.
No. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot going on in the world and people need to be better informed. That's why we run this channel. Is we hope to have people leave here not necessarily giddy, happy, entertained, but better informed and feeling better about.
If you haven't been watching us, everything that we have been saying has been coming true. And this is like since 2 years ago. Like, you got to keep up. You got to make sure you know what's going on, especially if you have any investments or you want to invest or you want to know what's going on in the markets and how it can affect you in your daily life.
Yeah, and I will admit, this doesn't have all the drama and intrigue.
No.
The great stories that other channels do. So, yeah, I don't have the entertainment value other channels do. But I think in terms of information that's actually useful to you, to make better decisions in your life over time, if you listen to this channel, you will come away better informed. And that's
Yep.
our goal. That's what we strive to do.
And you get to watch me
Admitted,
eat every now and then.
yeah. Admittedly, finance is not as fun as, some of the other channels. I'm kind of a little envious of them. I'm jealous of some of the ways that they can spin tales and add drama and intrigue, because everybody loves some good drama and intrigue. I probably don't talk enough about whores, pimps, and prostitutes to make it terribly entertaining, but
Melissa.
we have them in finance.
Melissa.
How dare you say this channel is not entertaining? Well, I'm saying relatively. I think to many people, talking about finance and the markets and some of these economic numbers and data or whatever is not quite as entertaining. So trying to be honest. You are very gracious, and you have been just a great
Yes,
friend
very.
and member of the family, and we do love you. So thank you.
Yes, but
And
we're
we
not
have our
always
moments.
like we don't have all the drama, you know. It's just truth. Damn it.
Yeah, there's no murder mystery. There's no
No.
intrigue.
Mm-mm.
Or not much. Occasionally we can have some, but we have our
We can pull
moments. We'll
some out
have
every now
Chunk
and
on
then.
every once in a while, and Chunk is cute as hell. Tallulah is sweet. We'll have Mahoney purring.
Chunk.
We need to
Yes. Do what?
have another pet night. I've said that a couple times.
Yes,
We
we do.
just need to go ahead and do
Yeah.
that some Tuesday.
Well, Chunk woke me up this morning, and I was having some sort of night terror like I do, but the fact that Chunk was laying on my knee and it was in an awkward position and it hurt like hell, it woke me up. So he did the thing. Yes.
Chunk,
Highly entertained by Alvin.
So Chunk went flying.
Sometimes we have, yeah. No, he didn't. I just woke up. I was like, and I couldn't even move my leg. I was in so much pain.
But he doesn't weigh much of
You were
anything. He's a stinky little thing.
He's 20 pounds on my knee. Well, Jane, I was highly entertained by Alvin too. That was pretty damn funny, by the way.
I'm glad y'all enjoyed
Good to
that.
see you. Thank you for tuning in. Missed you. Had a great show on Saturday. If you missed the Saturday show, go back and watch it. Chunk brings all the drama. Chunk is a mess.
Where is the booger?
In the other room. He actually had this bowl on the coffee table that had those little, I don't know what kind of wicker or whatever balls that you can put in a bowl for like decoration. Well, I had to move it because Chunk kept taking all the balls out of the bowl that were not balls. They were decorative balls. And yeah, he thought they were his balls.
That's funny. I can see him doing that, walking around so proud that he has a new ball.
Oh yeah, I'm like, dude, that is decoration. That is not a round spherical object. I was like, it is it is a round spherical. It is not a ball. It is not a chunk ball. Not chunks.
Yeah, you can't use the word ball around Chunk. He perks up immediately. I've never in my life seen a dog so obsessed with a ball.
When we call it
he's
a
in a
round
league all his
spherical,
own.
yeah. I said round spherical object. I was like, actually, it is. Yeah, but it's not yours.
Yeah, he's a
Y'all know
cute
we
little
call it
bugger.
that. He's a little shithead. Bless him. He's a mess.
You better be taking good care of him. He's a sweetie.
Yes, he is. And Mahoney has been venturing out of the new location.
Has
all
been
on
what?
her own. She's more venturing outside.
Oh, good for her.
I kept her in for a week. And Yeah. And so she goes out and she started slowly marking doors and posts and things with her scent. And then she'd, go a little bit and come back in. Then she'd go a little bit further and mark everything so she can find her way home. And then come back in and go out. And today she like went out, didn't know where she was for a while. She came scratching at the back door, per usual.
Is Vincent getting used to her being around?
No,
Ugh,
Vince has no social skills at all for being a cat. Like,
I was
you're a cat.
hoping he'd warm up
You
to the
should not
idea.
like stare at other cats. That's just not how they communicate. Like, you have to kind of blink. Don't keep your eyes all the way open. Vince is as special as Spasm is. I have two special needs animals.
Ellen
It's
is
fun.
a special needs animal special needs magnet.
Apparently, yes. Mahoney's the
Um,
really only intelligent normal animal that I own.
yeah, Mahoney's sweet. She's a cool cat.
Hmm.
Not gonna lie. All right, let's continue with the role of government in the economy and why it may be a serious concern for the market. This
Okay, real
chart
quick.
points
So if
out.
you are thinking, hang on. If you're thinking about retiring in the next 6 months, should you or should you wait?
With that, there's just not enough information for me to try to give a decent answer. It's I think the market will have a hard time for a little while. 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. I can't say specifically.
Okay.
There are emotional cycles in the market where when it's going up,
It's not supposed to be emotional.
when you have optimism in the economy. Then normally when the market peaks, people are euphoric. They're like, all is well. We're smarter, wiser than everybody else. This is still a great buying opportunity, on and on and on. Cockiness, euphoria. That's normally around where the market peaks. As it starts dropping, you see fear increasing. It's kind of what we're seeing now. And then, fear increases, the market drops faster, and eventually it gets to a state, call it capitulation, where people just give up and say, we're all doomed. The economy sucks. We'll never be able to do anything. Remember how a year and a half ago, Gen Zers were saying we'll never be able to buy a house?
Right.
Well, house prices have already come down 10 or 20% since then, and they're not done yet.
Right.
Nothing stays up, nothing goes up forever, nothing goes down forever, but there'll be
That
an
makes me feel
attitude.
I'm so warm and fuzzy right now since I just sort of bought a house ish.
Cool. Congratulations.
I moved.
Yes. I did not know there
Hmm.
was ownership there.
There is a
So,
stake in ownership. Yes. I feel so
yeah.
much better now.
Well, cool. Very cool. Um, we so capitulation. That's normally when the market is bottoming, somewhere around there. That normally when everybody else is saying it's the end of the world, we're done, we're dead, we'll never do anything, market sucks, economy's absolutely horrible. That's normally the time when it's best to start buying. And if you kind of wonder, keep an eye on Buffett. you may be a month or two, couple months behind Buffett, but when he starts buying stocks again, that might be commune at E-Train.
Commune.
That
It
would,
is.
yeah, that would be pretty cool. She probably actually would enjoy that.
Hell yeah.
So that normally would be the time to start buying. Now, what's the future prospects of the economy? Again, my crystal ball is not perfect. But if I look at history and if I look at the goals of the administration, one, Musk was on some interview the other day, and he was stating, relatively honestly, that he thought DOGE would be able to cut $1 trillion in government spending, which would be utterly huge. Now, if Trump is able to get the permanent tariffs,
Hang on. Put that into perspective. Let's say you started a business when Jesus was born, okay, and you made $1 million a day. Between now and then, you still would not have $1 trillion. Think about that.
Yes. We have trouble realizing the size of $1 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good example. So you can watch Buffett and see when he has the largest cash reserve he's ever held, both as a percentage of his assets and in terms of dollars. Last I saw, it was near $350 billion, billion with a B, in cash. Selling stocks left and right, BOA, Apple, etc., all the big names. Well, when he starts buying stocks, if you're not sure where the state of the market is, kind of keep an eye on Buffett. Follow this channel. We update you regularly on his positions. Druckenmiller, same thing. I tell you what I'm doing. Now, I'm not advising anybody to follow what I do or what I say. It's your money. You're responsible. But I share with you what I do and why, the reasons behind it. And hopefully that helps give you insight. Not that you'll agree, not that you'll like what I say, but it at least gives you a perspective to consider and judge and evaluate for your situation. Now, if Buffett and Druckenmiller are doing something, I probably would recommend that. Or Pelosi, perhaps the greatest investor in history.
Uh-huh.
But
I'll be right back. I got tinkle.
No problem. So information. That's really what we try to do, is share information and give you a little bit of understanding what's going on in the world and in the economy at large. Now, the growth in the economy. I talked about how, if spending is reduced by $1 trillion and a half dollars, $2 trillion, what does that do to the economy? This chart sums it up really nicely. On the left-hand side, you see the increase in the economy, GDP, for the third to fourth quarter in the U.S. last year. Beside it, on the right, you see the amount of debt, not spending, just the amount of debt that the government borrowed in that same time period. So they borrowed $680 billion. GDP increased $370 billion. So basically, for every $2 the government borrows, GDP is growing $1. That's not a good value, and that is not sustainable. That will lead the U.S. to basically third world status. if that continues. That is why what DOGE is doing is so important. Personally, I don't think GDP ought to contain or include government spending, because government can then, just through borrowing, always show and promote a positive GDP, even like though what we've seen over the past year or two where the private sector is getting hammered. When the growth in the economy is less than the government borrows, that's just the result of federal spending and borrowing. It's not an improvement in the economy. It's the illusion of growth. It's a Potemkin economy where waste and corruption is magically turned into production. Now, this magic, including government spending and GDP, hasn't always been the norm. The magic began in 1993 with a revision to the SNA, System of National Accounts, where the GDP definition was reframed from the point of view of residents receiving income rather than the point of view of production, national production, which GDP, gross domestic production. So it really ought to be GDM, or, gross domestic money, gross domestic spending. Anyway, so the question is, should government spending, the ability to permanently grow GDP, even when 2 million full-time jobs are being lost, when only part-time jobs are being added, when manufacturing and production shrinks for 24 out of 25 months, should that be how we evaluate politicians and the impact of their policies on the economy? You let me control spending. You let me control borrowing. You give me the ability to borrow unlimited amount of funds. I can get the GDP positive every quarter. I can show you a quote unquote growing economy. What also is very likely to happen is that there will be inflation. Your standard of living will be decreased. Good full-time career jobs will be fewer and fewer. Opportunities will be fewer and fewer. Dependency will grow. Poverty will grow. So how do you want to judge politicians and their political views' impact on the economy? Is it just by GDP? Or do you want to look at things like poverty rates? Do you want to look at things like job creation? Do you want to look at things like job openings? Do you want to look at things like real household income? Do you want to look at things like hourly wages? Do you want to look at upward mobility from the lower class to the middle class, from the middle class to the upper class? Or do you want to just focus on GDP and say, all is well, all is well? I care, E-Train and I think many of the members of the family care more about how individuals fare than we do how politicians look. So, this graph to me is, what's the old adage? A picture is worth 1,000 words.
Hey, sorry, I got kicked off.
10,000 words. Well, welcome back.
I got kicked off.
Glad to have you back.
Well, you might want to see too.
There's the stud. Goofy ass dog. You still can't see anything but a black pile of nothing. No nose. No. But I'll give him credit.
See a tongue every now and then.
Dog.
Hmm?
But I'll give him credit. He is not a camera hog.
Mm-mm.
He's a cute ball of fluff. He is. He's a sweetie.
You can see a tongue.
He's just a good-natured old fella.
He
He is
is.
one of the
I thought
happiest
you.
guys.
He is.
He reminds me a little bit of Thor in one regard. And for those of you that
Aw.
don't know, my Irish Wolfhound died last week, passed away. But Thor had the ability to make everybody happy. Didn't matter whether they liked animals or not. He was big, goofy, happy-go-lucky, and he just ended up brightening everybody's day. Chunk shares that same trait.
Yes, he does.
He just makes people happy, even if they're not really necessarily dog people. Just a goofy, happy-go-lucky kind of spirit. Thank you, Melissa. He was good. That's the only problem with Irish Wolfhounds is they have short lifespans, 5 to 7
Yes,
years.
They do.
But topic for another day.
He doesn't want to get down, but he doesn't want to be still.
He wants some attentions. He wants you to go throw the round spherical object.
He does, the decorative one as well. All right, I'm gonna let him back out into the world.
Now, I don't know whether this is good news or not. Probably not. Since we're on a roll tonight, probably not.
Moffat, can't we just get a little bit of happy news somewhere?
Melissa, 5 to 7 years. Has that always been the case, or is that more recent? That's always been the case. Big dogs, and this is an Irish Wolfhound. For those of y'all not familiar with Irish Wolfhound, when he stood on his back legs, he was about 7.5, 8 feet tall. He easily could look over the top of a refrigerator.
Yeah,
now,
they're bigger than Great Danes.
Yeah, he and normally they're going to weigh somewhere around 180 to 220 pounds. And they have very long, thin legs. The weight is all in their chest and head, jaws. Extremely powerful. If you have ever seen Roman iconography from the Roman Empire days, you will see oftentimes their battalions will have dogs. And the dogs look exactly like an Irish Wolfhound. So don't know exactly how far back they go or not. They were bred or adopted to hunt wolves, which are a sizable
animal
I
gotta tell you, Thor's head, Thor's skull was as big as mine. No doubt.
Yeah, the width of it was as big as Ellen's.
head.
Obviously, the snout is much longer. They have very long, extremely powerful jaws.
Thank you for that.
Well, I'm just talking about, I'm not saying your head
longer.
is, I'm not saying your head is abnormally big. You have a perfect sized head. But Thor had a big head.
My nose. Thank you for saying my nose wasn't as big as Thor's.
Yes, not anywhere near as big.
Yes, they are beautiful.
But they
are so beautiful. They are majestic.
Yeah, the one problem with them is that they're sight hounds. And if a sight hound will chase whatever it sees running. I wasn't fully appreciative of that when I first rescued Thor. We were out on the...
I guess not.
Do what?
The first night, I guess not.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was giving him custody of him, and so the first night I had him full time was I don't sleep much, and so we were out on the front porch 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and my neighborhood was kind of empty at the time. We've since had a lot of construction, but there weren't many people. And so I would go out in my skivvies and a t-shirt. and just sit out there. It's a beautiful summer night and just enjoy the night. And there were 2 deer across the street. And I saw them, and Thor and I were sitting there looking at them, and just, I was kind of like at peace. Wasn't really thinking. And those deer took off. Sight hound. Did I mention that they would chase anything that runs? And so Thor,
Mhm.
basically an 8-month-old puppy who was already 140, 50 pounds, took off. I mean, he was gone quicker than I could react. And so I'm sitting there at midnight yelling at the top of my lungs at Thor as he is chasing 2 deers down the street. And I'm running barefoot, chasing them down the street in my skivvies, yelling at the top of my head. And you just see lights
And if
in the
y'all
houses.
and if y'all have not heard Clay yell, it is not his voice carries. Let's just put it that way.
I have the ability to project with
Yes,
intensity.
you do. Yes.
And so, I run 2 or 3 blocks and the deer run into woods. Thor's chasing behind him into the woods. And I'm sitting there thinking, I have lost this puppy. He doesn't know where I live. He doesn't know the neighborhood. He's got no brains. I have no way of finding him or tracking him through these woods. We're surrounded by a lot of federal lands that are permanently wooded. And I'm like, what the hell? And, down the street, I see the 2 deer running out. No Thor. And so I'm sitting there yelling. And finally, the idiot comes dope-de-doe out of the woods and comes up to me, just as happy as he can be. And so I grab him by the scruff of his neck, and we're walking up the street. All my neighbors are out on their porch waving. So I'm just sitting there like a beauty contestant going up the street, dragging Thor with me. And of course, he wants to go visit everybody. And I'm sitting there in my skivvies.
You're half naked.
Half naked. And so that was my first night with Thor. And, I've also, I need to look it up, but I had a video and I'd seen it before of this old lady, fairly heavy set lady, white haired, 70, 80 years old with with a Great Dane
Mm-hmm.
on a leash. And she throws a stick and the Great Dane takes off and she's holding on to the leash. Literally in the video, you see her going horizontal and out of the picture. You literally see her ass and feet going out of the picture. I remember that. So I was never real crazy about putting Thor on a fixed leash because the dog can just flat out take off.
He's strong as he can be too, or he was
Oh,
strong
yeah.
as he could be, sorry.
And remember, they were bred to run down and kill wolves. So, but I would put an electric collar on him. And the first couple times, I'd hit that thing and make a Christian out of him. I'd have him down on his knees. And after doing that a couple times, he was a whole lot easier to train. Verbal commands, whatever. Before then, he was a little stubborn. But just a good-natured fella. Loved that dog. He was the bestest pup, the bestest kind of pup, just good-natured guy. So I was privileged to know him. All right. Continuing the news.
And
Home prices.
Clay, he's lucky you rescued him. His life was crap.
Yeah.
You gave him a better life.
I believe so. I like to think so. I did love him.
I know you did.
I even think about getting another one. Like I talk about wanting to homestead.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'll have, chickens, maybe some little miniature cows, whatever, some different creatures running around. And I think about getting, a couple of wolfhounds or maybe Great Pyrenees. I think they're better with livestock probably. But if I get them as
Mhm.
pups and raise them around the livestock, teach them not to chase the chickens, I just love
Well, Thor would
wolfhounds.
lay with them. Thor would lay in the yard with chickens. They lay on him.
Probably. Yeah. Probably. He would lay down and let Tallulah jump on his face, play with her. I've still got a video of the two of them playing chase. It's
Mhm.
really cute. Big old
It's
lumbering, goofy
funny.
dude, and Tallulah is just cutting in and out. But got another
And I've
one
got the one
where,
on the porch.
yep, that's the one I'm talking about.
Mhm.
He was standing up and she'd jump up and try to reach his face. Y'all have seen Tallulah. She does this little thing with her paws. It's cute as hell. But anyway, when Ellen leaves, the picture of Tallulah with her paws, that's Tallulah. And so she was trying to reach his face and couldn't. So he laid down on the floor so she could jump up and beat his face. And they were just playing
Mhm.
and going back and forth. And just a good natured dude. Could be a little stubborn when he
He was a
wanted to
great
do
dog.
something or take off, but
Yep.
he, he was he was a good natured dude.
But every
Uh,
time that you would go and visit him, he would lose his mind seeing you. He loved you
yeah,
so much. Like,
we
you
had a
did
thing.
save his life. I know.
We had a thing.
And I don't like to get all feely about it, but
Well, he I just wish they lived longer.
I know.
It's too soon. Anyway,
That's why Clay hates to have animals because they pass away.
and I just don't handle that well.
No, you don't.
Um, home prices. Let's switch to the good
And you're
news.
okay.
I saw this graph and I thought it was relatively interesting. It shows home prices adjusted for inflation over the past 130 years. And as you can tell, here's the mean. You can see this green line going through the middle. And keep in mind, this average includes this, I want to call it an aberration, but it's more like an abomination. It is just grotesquely unreal. But this is the inflation adjusted housing prices after the year 2000. This is about the year 2000 right here. And that begs the question, what the hell happened? So without this abomination, this average would be much lower. But so you can see housing prices on an inflation adjusted basis for, 111 years, 110 years were relatively stable. They tracked the inflation rate reasonably well. Only in the past 20 years have they just gone crazy. And so I look at that and I go, that's interesting data. Something changed. Something in the system changed. Some reality changed. What changed? Well, doing a little work, doing a little research, you know, it started in 2000. And so normally there's some change in the system before that. Well, what the hell happened in the 90s? There's something systemic in this issue. We see the subprime bubble clearly, and then we see the, soaring housing prices after the subprime bubble crashed. So, how did it all begin? Well, there's a story here. So, have a seat, settle in, and I'll tell you a tale. Back in time, back in the day, banks would not lend to people who couldn't pay them back. It was real simple. Now, we've talked repeatedly about how banks can't handle losses well. They just simply can't. It will put them out of business quickly if they have too many losses. But that means that the people that banks want to lend to, that the people banks historically have lended to, normally they're not desperate for the money. They don't need the loan. They have been diligent in handling their prior debts, paying back their prior debts, and they have good collateral. Bedtime stories with Clay. Yeah, this will probably put all y'all to sleep. So, but I think the perspective is important. So banks wanted to lend to people who really didn't need the money, who they were sure could pay them back. But politicians looked at the lending practices, particularly in the mid-90s, and decided there was a racial aspect to it. As the poor and blacks were particularly concentrated in cities, and banks wouldn't lend in those neighborhoods. In fact, the banks would have like a map of the city on the wall, and they would have areas outlined in red in which they would not issue loans in that section, in that area. The practice became known as redlining. Now, I am not going to argue that it's racial or that it was just business, because to do that, I have to judge the bankers' hearts and spirits. I can't do that. That's beyond my skill set. I do know that the whites that lived in those areas didn't get loans, and blacks that lived outside of those areas could get loans. But I can't say honestly that all of it wasn't racial. I just don't know. So, not really going to focus on that. Doesn't really matter, because the politicians, President Clinton, Henry Cisneros, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Barney Franks, a noted senator, Nancy Pelosi, a noted senator, all decided that it was racial, and they revised Jimmy Carter's Community Reinvestment Act in 1995, revision to the CRA Act. First passed under Carter, the purpose of this bill was to address inequities in commercial and residential lending. Well, the 95 revision went farther. It actually required banks to make loans to people who couldn't afford to pay them back. We call them subprime loans. And the way they required this was that it would be one of the factors used in judging whether or not the bank could merge with other banks or whether it could open new branches. So it was kind of a carrot and stick approach. So banks, for the first time in their history, started making loans to people who basically couldn't afford them or who were very high risk. Then something else happened. In 1999, two Clinton appointees for the two GSEs, government sponsored enterprises, GSEs, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Federal National Mortgage Company and Federal Home Loan Mortgage Company. Howell Raines and Raines and Johnson anyway, decided to change the mission of the GSEs from customer service to market share, market outreach. Now, historically, these GSEs, created by an act of Congress to provide, quote unquote, liquidity to the mortgage market. The GSEs would take qualified bank loans, like conforming loans, as they were called, which means you had 20% down and income, the mortgage loan payment would be less than 24% of your monthly income, et cetera, conforming loans. They would buy these conforming loans from the banks, which would give the banks cash that they could turn around and make another loan with, the bank profited off of each loan it made, receiving 1% of the value of the loan. So if they make a $300,000 loan, they make a clean $3,000. Well, the more they can make, the better. But there were only so many qualified borrowers who could meet the conforming loan standards. Well, the GSEs would take these loans that they bought and package them into a bond-like security called a mortgage-backed security, or MBS. This MBS would then be sold off, or pieces to it, pro rata shares would be sold in the market like an individual bond. So the buyer would receive the interest and principal payments received by the mortgage-backed trust. The payments that an individual would make on your mortgage, like if you have a mortgage or making a mortgage payment, you make the check out to a bank. Well, the bank actually most likely is just servicing that loan. They take your money and pass it on to this trust. The trust then passes it through to you, less 0.25% for handling and service. Well, that's why sometimes these mortgage-backed securities are also called pass-through securities. You might have heard that term used by people, pass-through securities. Well, the money the GSEs received from selling these mortgage-backed securities would enable them to go out and buy more mortgages from the banks. And so the cycle continued. This is how they were structured to provide, quote unquote, liquidity to encourage trading and sales in mortgages so that the banks could make more mortgages and hopefully keep the mortgage rates lower because supply would be increased. Well, the real fuel for this huge surge, the subprime surge, and even the surge after, occurred in 1999 when the GSEs changed their focus that I alluded to a minute ago. They changed it from customer service to market share. Well, in 1999, both GSEs, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, told the banks they would buy subprime mortgages, all they could produce. The spigot was then turned on, not only turned on, but cranked the hell up. Banks found free money because the banks could make a loan to anybody for any reason and then sell it to Fannie Mae. So the banks make money and have no risk, no stake in the game, no flesh in the game. This led banks to making loans to most every investor that couldn't pay them back. And they used some creative techniques like a ninja loan, ninja, Ninj, no income, no job. Think about it. No income, no job. So you had no income, you had no job, and you could go get $1 million mortgage. There was there were stories like guy in California, might have been in Santa Monica. I don't remember exactly, but he saw a house he wanted. The way it worked was, find a house he wanted, $1 million house. And he went to the bank and said, "Hey, I really like this house. I'd like to buy it." The bank goes, "Great. We can help you out, hopefully. How much do you make?" And this guy doesn't have a job. He says, "How much do I need to make?" And they go, "Well, for a $1 million mortgage, you need to make $32,000 a month." He goes, "Yeah, no problem." Bank goes, "Great." Doesn't ask for a tax return, doesn't ask for a payroll statement, anything. Doesn't verify anything. So he ends up getting this $1 million mortgage, buying the house. Well, he has no job. He has no income. 6 months go by. He doesn't make a single mortgage payment. So the bank calls him up and is like, "We're going to have to foreclose." The guy says, I'll get you the money. 3 months later, the bank calls him back and says, "Hey, we're going to have to foreclose." Guy goes, well, let me ask you, my house has increased to $1.5 million. Would you be interested in refinancing it? And the bank goes, it'll $1.5 million? They go, yeah, we'd love to make that loan. So he goes in and he gets $1.5 million loan. Still, no job, no income. He pays off the $1 million mortgage he owes, and then he has $500,000 to live off of for the next year or two. How cool is that? That's the kind of stupidity that was going on in the mortgage market in some of these areas. They had other creative loans like step loans where, normally you want somebody to have a mortgage payment that is no more than 24% of their income. Well, at normal interest rates, the mortgage payment might be 50% of their income or 70% of their income. So the bank came up with something called a step mortgage, where they cut the interest rate to 1% the first year. That greatly lowered the payment, and the person could qualify at that level for the mortgage. Well, in year 2, the mortgage went up to 2%. Year 3, 3%. Year 4 kept stepping up until it reached the current market rate. Most of you are familiar, I think, with adjustable mortgages, where you have very low rates, but they change every 6 months. They adjust to whatever the market rate is. And this was an era when interest rates were very low. So a lot of people could qualify for an adjustable rate. But if the rates went up 1%, 2%, they couldn't make the payment. They still got the loan. So you had all these people coming in and buying houses. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not only poor people that were given loans. People with good incomes were given more loans than what they should. Doctors who could qualify for maybe 4 or 5 loans were given 20 loans, and they were going out and buying houses to rent left and right. If you ever saw the movie The Big Short, which is on this topic, on this issue, 2 of the guys are out in Vegas looking at the Vegas boom, and they're talking to a stripper. And she's talking about how all the houses she's been buying. And they're sitting there looking at each other going, how the hell? That's when they knew this was just utter fraud and ridiculous. Anyway, I think you get the idea. A ton of people were getting loans they couldn't afford. And they really didn't have to be poor. We're talking about well-heeled individuals too, making good money, doctors, lawyers. So you had banks producing all the loans they could because it was free money to them. They're giving loans to anybody who walked in the door. Didn't need a job, didn't need a checking account, didn't need a good history of payment, nothing. Now, does that sound reasonable to anyone? We need to watch that for movie night. It's time to have another movie night. And that'd be a good one to watch. We need to get E-Train on that. Since she's not here, we can talk about her. So the idea is that tons of people, increasing number of people every year, because the banks were cranking out these loans every year. You had very low interest rates for the first year or two, and then it would rise slowly over the next 5 to 7 years to the market rates. Now, another key aspect of these low interest loans with the low interest rates up front, they had negative amortization with them. Amortization. Every month you pay the interest outstanding on that loan plus a little bit of principal. So next month, the interest you owe is reduced. The amount of principal you pay increases a little bit. You do that every month, and over 30 years, it ends up paying off the whole loan. Well, when you have a payment that doesn't even cover the interest due on the loan that month, you're not even making the interest payment. That difference, that negative difference, adds to your principal, adds to the amount of the loan that you owe. So every month you make a payment, you owe more and more and more. It's called negative amortization. And almost all of these loans had negative am. So people would pay on them for 2, 3, 4 years and would owe more than they initially borrowed. Brilliant idea. Well, it was a boon, as you can tell, to home ownership, to home buying. Home buying prices just went through the roof. It was a boon for banks, profits with no risk, because they were able to sell off the loans. They didn't have to keep the loans, they sold them. And Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac would package them. And because they were government sponsored enterprises, whatever they sold had a triple A rating, the highest rating. It's like, almost like the government backed rating, when in reality, the government was not backing or not legally obligated to back these two enterprises, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. It was just a weird situation. So the lending continued. You saw housing prices soar to ridiculous levels. And then the reckoning came. 2007, 2008, the market adjusted closer to historical norms. And then the Fed was added again. Now, I left out right in, after 2000, 2001, what happened in 2001? 9/11. Well, at 9/11, the economy just ground to a halt the very next day. I was CFO for a regional publishing company, and within 3 days, we lost every contract we had. We had zero income coming in within 3 days. We weren't alone. The whole economy just immediately shut down. The huge, huge uncertainty. Well, the Fed, the gang that people love to hate on, stepped in and cut interest rates down to near zero. So basically, you could borrow free money. That kept a lot of businesses alive until the economy started cranking up again. But it kept interest rates very low. So all these mortgages that were adjustable or reset at very low rates. So they didn't default. People could still afford them. And new ones were still being made hand over fist. I mean, the interest rates on them were initially 1%, 0.5%. It was stupid. So you had tons and tons of people with these kind of mortgages. Finally, the Fed says, hey, the economy's going well enough. We need to start hiking rates. And they started hiking in 2005. So as rates started going up over the next year or two, that's when these mortgages started getting too expensive for people to afford them. And that's when the defaults started. And that's when the subprime crisis began that ended up destroying the whole economy, the whole financial markets. Well, subprime crisis goes on, 2009, 2010. The economy's still in the doldrums. So what does the Fed do? Well, it figured the last time it cut rates to zero, a lot of people bought houses. So let's try it again. So starting in 2010, the Fed started what's known as QE, quantitative easing. And they lowered the interest rates back down to zero. And they held that for practically a decade. Well, what do you think would happen to housing? Well, boom, you've got this second half. And if you look, starting around 2020, with the COVID stimulus, rates were cut to near zero. This line goes vertical. just vertical. Housing prices soared ridiculously, even on an inflation adjusted basis. I mean, I refinanced my house at 2.5% for 30 years, which is stupid. If any idiot is willing to lend me money at 2.5% for 30 years, I'll take it. I'll take it all day long. My house payment is half of what I'd pay for an apartment that would be half the size of my house. It'd be 1/5 the rent I'd pay for the house. It's stupid. Big stupid. But they did it, and I took it. A lot of other people did too. So you saw housing prices again soar. Interest rates dropped, stayed low, and a housing bubble has reemerged. So let me ask you, based on history, what do you think will happen? How do you think this ends? Do you think it'll end any differently than the subprime crisis did? Is there another reckoning ahead? Now, let me ask you, those that are familiar with the show, what's my rule number 2? For those of you that may not be familiar, I have 50 rules for life. And rule number 2 is stupid should hurt. Well, here's a picture of stupid. Here's a picture of the previous stupid. And here's the hurt. What do you think's going to happen? Melissa, month and a half after 9/11 is when I quit my job, packed up, left everything I knew, and moved to LA. Not a bad time to move to LA. You got some good years there. It is a beautiful area. I thought that was rule number 1. No, that's rule number 2. Rule number 1 is do what I say, do exactly as I say, exactly when I say it, exactly how I say it, and you will be okay. I normally just mention that one to my students. I tell them what to study. I'll help them, tell them how to study, when to study, what to study. And if they do that, they will be okay on the test. So some people think rule number 2 ought to be rule number 1. I don't argue that. Rule number 2 is a pretty good rule. So simply housing, residential market, we're already seeing it start to crash in a number of areas. It's crashing in Florida. Insurance rates have gone through the roof. People can't afford the insurance, so they're dumping houses. Even Airbnb owners, with all the houses on the market, are seeing, and more houses being available for rent, are seeing less and less business. That will drive them to putting more and more houses on the market. Austin, Texas is collapsing. It's down 20 or 30% so far. California, New York, some places in Michigan. It's becoming more and more widespread, particularly in the under, say, $500,000-$600,000 houses. $1 million houses haven't seen the effect yet, largely, but it'll probably hit them too. But there's a reckoning ahead in housing. I don't have to have a perfect crystal ball to see it. I can't tell you exactly when it will be. I kind of have a hint that it's already begun, but there's a reckoning ahead. Now, one other big issue has been the well-known, much-loved Bitcoin. Gotten some questions on this. And if you'll notice, Bitcoin since the beginning of February, end of January, has fallen about almost 25%. Now, if you see the little uptick here, it had a nice little recovery today. But for the past week, a week ago, President Trump established, he said on March, I guess it was March the 7th, hadn't been quite a week yet, that his that the administration was going to establish a Bitcoin reserve, a crypto reserve. And in a lot of the media that I read initially, they were saying there are no further plans to buy anything, which was kind of a huge disappointment to the market. There was hope that the federal government would start buying Bitcoin, and that obviously would be a huge factor in driving the price. Well, the reality, and so Bitcoin, crashed. Well, the reality is that what President Trump said in his March 7th statement was that his administration is exploring ways, quote, to invest in Bitcoin for the National Strategic Reserve established through this new executive order. Now, he made this at a big White House crypto conference attending by leading figures, in the digital asset industry, however you want to call it. But he made his word choice was interesting. He said the federal government is already the largest holder of Bitcoin, or among the largest holders of Bitcoin. They basically hold 200,000 Bitcoin, which is worth about $17 billion. Not a bad stake. But pay attention to the wording of this, and I quote, "These existing holdings will form the foundation of the new reserve." Form the foundation of the new reserve. Does that sound like the federal government is not going to buy any more to you? It doesn't to me. But then he continued. He said, the Treasury and Commerce Department will explore new pathways to accumulate additional Bitcoin holdings for the reserve, provided it's done at no cost to the taxpayer. So he's given a mandate to the Treasury and Commerce Department to seize more Bitcoin, to make that an increasing priority. And he even alluded to the fact that, if they can find extra money, they may buy some additional Bitcoin with the extra money. They're not done building this strategic reserve is the bottom line. Don't know exactly the timing, don't know how fast, how far, but they're not done. That's clear. Trump also criticized the Biden administration for selling significant holdings of the crypto. He said, and I quote, "Following this, from this day on, America will follow the rule that every Bitcoin holder knows very well. Never sell your Bitcoin." We're not done yet. There's, it's taken a hit. Bitcoin has taken hits before, but it'll be back. One other thing I wanted to show you, just for entertainment value, is the well-known debt clock. And we've used the debt clock for a while. A lot of little interesting data on here, and the data comes generally from the Treasury Department. Well, they've made an addition to this section, the DOGE clock. And right now, 42 days in, they've saved nearly $190 billion. That's over $4 billion a day. That's not a bad day's work. So we'll see. But I thought that was kind of an interesting addition. And it's, kind of fun to look at it and kind of cheer it on. Of course, traditionally I support, smaller government, lower taxes, this kind of thing. I want the government off my ass and out of my wallet. Some people, some viewers differ, and that's fine. But I personally am glad to see a lot of what they are discovering become public information. I think we need more transparency in government. Some things they've had to back off of. They might have cut something that was actually useful or didn't want to cut, and that's going to happen when you're dealing with bureaucracy and government of this size. What department was it? Was it Treasury? They found $4.7 trillion in checks written since 2010 that they could not identify where they went. They will have to track each one down manually, see if they can find out where it went. If it went to a shell company, there's more investigation and time that was needed, but taxpayers ought to be able to see and identify where every dollar of government spending goes, unless it's in a black box program, obviously. But there's a lot of money that we can't track. That's a problem. And I think most everybody can agree on that. Taxpayers ought to know where their money's being spent. Melissa, we need another Bitcoin stream. I may do that and try to, go into more detail why Bitcoin is valuable. Why it's not a Ponzi scheme, and is it still attractive? Should it be attractive? So we can talk about that some and look at some of the features of it that don't get any attention, that most people aren't aware of. So we may very well do that coming up Saturday. Anybody have any questions? I'm a little bit long-winded. Hell, E-Train may have already passed out. I don't know. But anybody have any questions or comments? We're sorry for those of you on X that the broadcast screwed up. We know X has been, having some serious issues with attempted hacking. But for those of you that were able to join us or on replay crew, we really appreciate you being here. Hope the time was profitable for you. If you've got some other questions, some topic like Melissa just threw out, email me, moffatonmoney@gmail.com, or DM me on X, moffatonmoney. Or if you've got other questions, be glad to try to answer them. Want to thank y'all. It's good to see y'all again. It's been too long. Join us this coming Saturday night at 7, and we'll try to see what we can offer you in terms of entertainment value then. We'll have Chunk on again, maybe. Really, we thank you. We love you. And hope all of you have a great week ahead. Our time is up. We thank you for yours. Good night, y'all.